They were raised by the hundreds to light the treacherous reaches of the inland sea. Bold beacons of mortar, rock, and steel.
The lighthouses are the castles of America.
They are the timeless lighthouses of the Great Lakes.
Back at Rocco Ages.
There are more lighthouses here than on either seacoast. The 5 Great Lakes constitute one of the largest inland seas on the planet. They cover an area so large, they create their own weather patterns, known as lake effect. Lake Michigan and Lake Superior alone offer the visitor a rich variety of lighthouses and recreational opportunities. The offshore lighthouses that mark shoals and partially submerged rocks can be far from the nearest landfall. The romantic notion that we have of life on a lighthouse is vastly different from the way keepers actually existed on these remote stations. Rock of Ages Lighthouse is a forsaken outpost in the middle of Lake Superior. No one lives on the rock now. The automated light is maintained by the Coast Guard Aids to Navigation team. On this inspection trip, a former inhabitant has come along to visit his old home. John Tregembo served as an assistant keeper here when he was an 18-year-old Coast Guardsman.
Yep. Back at Rocco Ages. The old song, Rock of Ages, cleft for me. Look at this place. 50 years ago, and I finally landed down here again.
The lighthouse was once home to 4 full-time keepers. The highly polished and tightly run station that John remembers is no longer. When the light was automated, the unnecessary equipment was removed. Years without caring occupants have taken their toll on the living quarters.
50 years ago. Oh, darn it. Whew. You had 2 clocks, Seth Thomas, and they had to be right on time. Then your radio was right over on that side over there. This we're walking into right now is what was a mess deck. We used to have refrigerator and stove were set up right here, and the sink was, I think this is where our sink was, right over in this area.
Now, how many men were stationed here at one time?
We had 4 men stationed at the lighthouse.
So were there like 4 and one was away?
One on compensatory absence all the time.
Okay.
And 21 days here, then 7 days to go where you wished. But with the transportation that they had then, you didn't get very far. Now this next deck we're coming on to is where the bathtub set for the light. There's a great big mercury bathtub right in here, and that is what steadied the light. Because when the waves and that hit the light would be tilted. So with this sitting in a tub of mercury, it just floated right here, and it always stayed level. Now, you notice all these ventilators here. The reason for these ventilators is in the olden days they used acetylene gas. And with that acetylene gas or the kerosene, they had to have it ventilated, so they'd open up these ventilators.
The original lead crystal and brass lens at Rock of Ages was among the brightest on the lakes. It was replaced in 1985.
The world of plastics, just one little piece of plastic like that replaced that beautiful second order Fresnel lens. This is a modern Coast Guard.
If you look down inside here, our primary lamps, the one in red. So if you look inside there, you can tell we're still on the first lamp.
Lamp changer, automatic lamp
Yeah,
changer.
that's a 6-place lamp changer.
No brass to shine, no lens to polish. They got it made.
Well, John, you could have the honor to turn on the foghorn.
Well, this is sure easy compared to the olden days. There we go. See you in another 50 years. I know you'll be standing, I don't know about me.
The light at Rock of Ages is one of 4 lighthouses that mark the Isle Royal chain in northern Lake Superior. Liz Valencia is Chief of Cultural Resources at Isle Royal National Park.
I think lighthouses have special meanings in different ways for a lot of people. Some people are very interested in the lighthouse, the building itself, in the way it was built, where it was built, what shape it is, the design, the light, the strength of the light, the size of the lens. They want to visit many different lighthouses, count the steps as they go to the top. Other people are more interested in the life of a lightkeeper, how people lived at those remote places. How did they get their food? What did they do for fun? What did they do every day? How was their life different than the way we live now?
The Rock Harbor Lighthouse once guided ships to the copper mines on Isle Royal. The lighthouse was dark for over a century. It's been rebuilt and has a new life as the home and protector of the island's maritime history.
It's a great use for a structure like that. And it was an ideal place for a maritime history exhibit. It's right there when you're standing in the lighthouse looking out, you're seeing the channel there, you know why that lighthouse was used. It's an ideal spot to bring in the maritime history of the island, to combine the lighthouse history with the history of shipwrecks and just the general history of Lake Superior and fog and wind and storms. And we've got lake charts in there and maps, whatever people might be interested in.
Lake Erie, and that's Lake Ontario.
They must have been a very hardy, courageous bunch.
Everything is put in order. We leave this afternoon half-rose. We close the light for the season on the 10th of November, 1886. So they obviously do leave for the rest of the winter time.
It's a way of life that's passed now. And if we don't preserve the lighthouses, if we don't get the information that we can from the lightkeepers that are still alive, we'll lose it, and it will be a chunk of our history that will be missing. So I think it's important to preserve not only the structure, but it's also important to preserve the stories and the feelings behind being a lightkeeper, because that makes the building come alive to me.
Lighthouses were usually staffed by families. The lifestyle was difficult, but not without its rewards. Anne Bowen Hogue grew up on Passage Island, just off the eastern end of Isle Royal. Varon Bowen's choice of a career in the lighthouse service destined his family to a life of isolation on a small island, worlds away from the amenities of society. The island was fertile ground for the rich imagination of a child who remembers it fondly as a place of wonder and beauty.
This was my special place in the house. So if I did something wrong, got sent to my room, it was great. Because I'd sit in the window and I could watch out over the rocks and special places. And you know, not to have an education and not to go to school till I was 10, I never missed out on nothing. The education they taught me was very important. It was part of what I called home. And what you had here as a child was quality time with your parents. Quality time. Now, learning to walk was learning to swim, learning safety, learning to respect like superior. She's a lady. And when she gets mad and kicks up her heels, get in the safe court. Stay away from her. When she's calm, enjoy her, and she's beautiful. But respect her. I used to be a mountain goat when I was younger, but I guess the bones got old. I don't know. You can see the beach. On days off, Dad brings us over here in the rowboat. We have a little picnic down there, and we play in the water that you see out there. We could play on the rocks, and there's a nice little place over there to swim, and just kind of explore.
In a world without video games, computers, or television, Anne's playtime was enriched by a child's simple gift of imagination.
This is the kitchen. And see the stove? Just the right height. And if you notice, it's got burners that are hot. That's the way the moss does it. It's got little shelves made that you can put your dishes, make-believe salt and peppers. But it was a play. This was my play stove here. Spent a lot of hours in this area. In fact, quite often, I'd leave my rag doll and my dishes in the area. Well, there's no more dishes to wash, and nobody plays here anymore. Well, see, being here wasn't a duty for my father and us. It was a way of life. You know, it was something we were all proud of because of him. Putting the flag up in the morning was very important. And we would come out and watch him when he did this. Mom and all of us came out.
I think I'll stay a long time.
I think so too. I think so too. Thanks, Don. It doesn't take you much to take you back in time or to bring you forward.
All around the island, there were little family fishing camps. Almost every little harbor, every little bay had a family fishing camp with usually just a little cabin, a dock, a fish house, a net house, a couple of boats, and that's what they did. They came out kind of on the same cycle a lighthouse keeper did. Came out in the spring as soon as they could, slapped some paint on their boats, got them in the water, got their nets ready to go. And they stayed out here and fished until November, December, whenever the lake made them go back. And it was a very interesting way of life. It was a hard way of life. Those people persisted out here. We have the cultural demonstration at the Edison Fishery, and we hire a Park Service employee to fish down there. He talks about fishing, he catches fish, uses gill nets and all the equipment and gear that would have been used the time period that Pete Edison would have been fishing at the fishery.
It's just like it was, say, maybe 30s. It's about the same thing. And we do work on boats, as typical of the fishermen. He built his own boats, and they're wood boats, and we fix our own engines, we fix our nets. It's a historic thing. These floats here, these fishermen made his own. A lot of these. He didn't order these. He could do them himself. and it was soaked with oil, and so the water wouldn't penetrate. And those were jobs that were done in the wintertime. Even mending nets was always done in the wintertime. And usually you bring the net right in your house. You'd be in the front room, would be a net in there, scales and all. So, and that's about all there is about fishing.
The majestic Sand Hills Lighthouse marks the Keweenaw Peninsula on the southern shore of Lake Superior.
It was once called the last word in lighthouse design because it is the last manned lighthouse, shore-based lighthouse built on the Great Lakes. It is also probably the largest lighthouse built on the Great Lakes in space. It's not the highest, but it is the largest. The three-keeper dwelling, actually 3 lighthouse keepers and their families lived here.
Bill Fraboda is the proud keeper at Sand Hills today.
I used to look at this building when I first came and saw the beauty of it. To me, it was like a castle. So maybe I was like a little boy playing castle. I wanted something like this, a building I knew I could never build. The moment I saw Lake Superior, it was love at first sight. Lake Superior did it for me. Decided I had to be here. Then a few years later, let's say about 25 years ago, the bed and breakfast concept loomed on the horizon in this country, started getting really popular, really big. Then suddenly about 12 to 15 years ago, the interest in lighthouses started to mushroom. Putting those two things together gave me the perfect formula for a bed and breakfast. I knew that. I knew it would work. I think people that go to bed and breakfast at inns like this are seeking a unique situation. They're just wonderful people. I haven't had a bad guest yet. It's just one that I wouldn't like to see come back. They're just thrilled to be here. The majesty of Lake Superior and the fact that they're in a lighthouse, I think it just thrills them.
We just happened to come by a sign that said lighthouse this way, and we went, and after that I was just in love with them.
I think a lighthouse is being cozy. Cozy.
Well, the histories of lighthouses and the lighthouse keepers are fascinating. They really saved a lot of ships and lived a very private life. It's fun. I wouldn't want to have been a lighthouse keeper, but it's interesting to read about it and see about it.
The lighthouses are the castles of America because they sit out on these strange peninsulas and places which people don't often visit, and a lot of them are in disrepair and they're falling to pieces. And people are curious about them and just interested in coming and seeing them and staying them and kind of experiencing it for themselves.
Many of the lighthouses on the Great Lakes are rarely visited. The offshore lights that warn of shallow water or rocks, and the island lighthouses, can only be reached by boat or by aircraft. John Wagner is a pilot, photographer, and lover of lighthouses. Since 1958, he's logged over 8,000 hours in the air. Retired from his day job, he now combines his avocations, flying, photography, and the lighthouses of Michigan, into a satisfying second career. John's book, Michigan Lighthouses, An Aerial Perspective, is the product of his imaginative blend of aviation and photography.
A lot of people, I guess, are amazed at the fact that I fly the airplane and take pictures too. I don't think too much of it. I sort of say it's like a one-man band. He sits there and plays the piano keys and hums on a harmonica and beats the drum all at the same time. And I guess it's not too much different than the work he has to do. It provides me this opportunity to be more creative in combining of both, more of an art form than simply driving an airplane. The camera I use for this is a Bronica GS1. It is a 6x7 centimeter format. I added a gyroscopic stabilizer to the camera system, and that whole camera with the stabilizer weighs about 14 pounds. There's a great deal of time spent waiting for the right weather, particularly here in the Great Lakes. To get good images, there have to be a lot of things coming together. The right time of the year, proper lighting, the season that I'm trying to capture.
"22 islands make up the Apostle Island group at the western end of Lake Superior. Visitors are welcome at the island chain's 6 lighthouses. A voyage to Raspberry Island is a journey back in time.
Hey kiddies, how you doing today? Welcome to Raspberry. How you doing, folks?
Hello.
We'll all just gather up right here so that I can orient you to the island. It's not raining much and you're not made out of sugar.
Matt Welter, as lightkeeper Toots Winfield, performs an entertaining interpretive program that brings the history of the light station to life.
Everybody come on up. Gather around, folks. What you're looking at here is the Raspberry Island Lighthouse. It was built about 60 years ago, 1863. Originally, when there was fog here, the lighthouse keepers at Raspberry used to have to blow what was called a Gabriel's horn. They'd have to get a horn about so high and go like this. Do this with me. A 3-second blast, once a minute, for as long as the fog held. Think you could do that all night long? No. And if the boat kept coming, they'd get out a megaphone and they'd yell, "Hey, you yahoo, you're gonna hit my island!" But later on, we added this, 1903. This is our fog signal building here. But what happened was that the keeper that was there was just one keeper all by himself, a man named Charlie Hendrickson. And he had to run the thing the first night all by himself. Okay, so what I need you to do is we're going to do 3 things. You got to stoke the coals into the boiler. You got to make sure to blow the whistle, and you got to make sure to watch light. So I need you all to get nice big imaginary shovels. These big ones, heavy ones, okay? And we're going to start shoveling coal, all right? Ready? Okay, now run upstairs. Run upstairs, blow the whistle. Run back downstairs, stoke more coal. Run back upstairs, blow the whistle. Now run back downstairs. We're going to do something different. Run outside. We got to run up the tower now. Remember, the tower is a spiral staircase, so go around in circles. All right, check the light. It's still going. Okay, run back down the tower. Run back outside. Run back up the stairs. Blow the whistle. Run back downstairs. Stoke more coal. Now keep that up for about 3, 4, 5 hours. And that's what poor Charlie Hendrickson had to do. Interpretation, we try not to give out just facts to people, because facts don't really say much. I can tell you that the lighthouse is 40 feet high, or I can tell you that the lighthouse is high enough that if you fell off, you might break an arm or a leg. You know, which is going to stand in your mind more. Alrighty. This here is Mr. Benton's kitchen right here. Now, I bet you're all wondering why we don't have any furniture in here. Well, the first thing we do before we put any furniture in is we've got to make sure to varnish all the floors and whitewash every single wall. Now, let's see how high you can touch on the wall. Right here, Sonny. Go ahead and show me how high you can touch. All right, now see, if you were the keeper's son, you'd have to paint everything from here on down, all through the house, upstairs and down. And it's just because everybody helps out with the painting. Everybody, even the kiddies. Alrighty, this here's the other thing that they bring us. This is a roving lighthouse keeper's library. And this goes from lighthouse to lighthouse to lighthouse, all around the islands. We go ahead and we get ours and we send it out to Devil's Islands about a month and a half from now and get a new one. And then Devil's sends theirs to Outer and Outer sends theirs to Michigan. Come on up, folks. Use the hand reeling. Well, how do you like my lantern here, folks? I clean and polish this lantern so much, sometimes I think a genie's gonna pop out of the top. When I developed the character, I tried to choose a character that had virtually no background, virtually no living relatives. There was sort of a ambiguous character. I didn't want anybody that, you know, if I was playing them, somebody's relative would come along and say, hey, you're playing my uncle or my great-grandfather or something like that, and you're getting them all wrong. I wanted somebody who was obscure. And fortunately, Toots Winfield, whose real name was Herbert Winfield, who was the lighthouse keeper for almost 9 years here, he was just that. I think that people romanticize lighthouses in their minds. I've had several people that come out here say that they wish they could live out at a lighthouse. They want to hear about shipwrecks, and they want to hear about storms, and they want to hear about lighthouses with ghosts in them for some strange reason. And I think that in this day and age, it's really good to have something that isn't all high-tech, that people still love.
Devil's Island Light Station in the Apostle Islands provides an opportunity to experience lighthouse living. Volunteers carry on the time-honored rituals of lightkeepers during a magical summer-long assignment. This summer, Ed and Margaret Michon are in charge.
This is Devil's Island Light 501. We have winds to the northwest at about 7 knots. Waves are 2 to 3 feet at East Landing. The sky is clear. The temperature 57 degrees, 501. In our previous life, we were bureaucrats with the Department of Agriculture. We lived in Washington, D.C. and have lived there for many years, over 30 years. So coming here is the complete antithesis of living in Washington, D.C. And I think that's one of the things that really attracted us to this place. And we're really surprised at how true it is, how very opposite this is of Washington. And of course, that's great. We love Washington, but we really love it here too.
I couldn't imagine how nice it was going to be. We've been to the Apostles before. We knew what the area was like. We looked forward to it, but there's no way you can, in an abstract way, imagine how beautiful and how wonderful it is going to be. And it's been better than we ever thought.
Hi, how are you? Welcome to Devil's Island. Where are y'all from?
Minneapolis.
We get quite a few visitors coming through here to the park and visiting the lighthouse. So our job is to greet the visitors and show them the tower and tell them about the history of the place. And we found that the reaction of visitors to the park is uniformly favorable. People love it. Let's go over here to the light tower. There are light keepers at other stations who give us a hard time because our light tower is just a steel tube sticking out of the ground. But it's a nice steel tube, and we sort of like it. The tube is 82 feet high, 8 feet in diameter, and we climb up 96 steps to get up to the top and show visitors the view. It's the only tower in the Apostles that still has the original glass Fresnel lens. This lens, when you put a kerosene lamp in it, which is what they use, would shine a light 18 miles over the lake. They used to light the lamp in here a half hour before sunset, and they would check to see when there was a half hour by putting 4 fingers between the horizon and the sun. And when the sun came down to within 4 fingers, it's just about time now, they would light the lamp.
The first lighthouse in the Apostles, Michigan Island, was built in 1857. A beautiful stone tower with keeper's quarters. It was remarkably built in the wrong location. It was supposed to go on Long Island, 17 miles away. The practically useless light was only in service for a year. A taller tower that could be seen from all sides of the island was added later. That's why Michigan Island is graced with 2 light towers.
I feel very strongly that if historic lighthouses are to survive, they need to still have a function.
Don Terrace manages the Grosse Pointe Lighthouse near Chicago.
I think the obvious function for most lighthouses would be as interpretive tools, as kind of specialized maritime museums.
The Grosse Pointe Lighthouse was placed into service on March 1st, 1874.
Lighthouses during this period did resemble each other to a certain extent. You might find an Italianate influence in the towers or the keeper's quarters. Architects would classify these buildings here as being Italianate in design. As originally envisioned, the site was going to be operated by a head keeper and an assistant keeper. The keeper's quarters is constructed as a bisymmetrical building. The principal keeper would live on one side and the assistant keeper would live on the other. It was known as a very desirable station. You had access to a fairly affluent community, very close to the city of Chicago. You were able to take advantage of the cultural resources. This was a very plush situation for a federal keeper to have. Grosse Pointe Lighthouse is what's called a lake coastal lighthouse. It acted as a signpost, like a traffic light, guiding ships into Chicago Harbor. Ships heading for Chicago would first head to Grosse Pointe, the most natural landmark north of the city, and they would then follow the shoreline into Chicago's port. And it made this association between Grosse Pointe Lighthouse and the Chicago Harbor Lighthouse working in tandem very, very important.
The late 1800s were the heyday for building lighthouses on the Great Lakes. The building boom paralleled the growth of commerce in the region. Chicago Harbor was one of the busiest ports in the country. It rivaled New York and San Francisco. Tall-masted schooners carried grain to the cities in the east and returned with timber and supplies for the country's expansion westward. Time has put a new face on Chicago Harbor. The lighthouse now marks the river mouth for pleasure boats. The waterfront has a new look. Once a busy loading dock, the North Pier is an upscale boardwalk and a lively place to visit. The ships that carry cargo on the lakes today are massive. 1,000-foot-long ore carriers are the pride of the fleet. Minnesota's Duluth Harbor is one of the busiest ports on Lake Superior. Ships destined for cities to the east arrive empty to collect their cargoes of iron ore, grain, or coal. The Mesabi miner is loaded with iron ore. She's headed east for Nanticoke, Ontario. The one-way trip will take 3 days. It's midsummer and perfect weather for the cruise. Even when all's well, Captain Timothy Dayton maintains a healthy respect for the largest of the Great Lakes.
Well, when we get out in the middle, we can't see from one side to the other. It's 360 miles from Duluth to Whitefish Point. The lake is wide, the lake is deep, and it's cold all the time. It's a big body of water. We have several different electronic systems that we use for navigation and also collision avoidance. The first is radar. The second, we have a Loran C receiver. And the latest that we have had is the GPS system. And these are replacing traditional navigation methods of old. So really, lighthouses' importance to the commercial mariner on a ship have decreased greatly over the years. Okay, this is our location right now, this circle in the center of the screen. This is our route. We started in Duluth, went past Devil's Island on our way to Eagle and Copper Harbor. We should see Standard Rock, which is on the east half of the lake, Caribou Island, and finally we'll see Whitefish Point. We still use the paper charts. They're still a required item in our inventory. And I like to see that the officers on the watch put a position on the chart about once a half hour. Any one time, any of this electronic equipment could go out or fail. Lighthouses are there. When you see the light that you know is your home harbor and it's flashing in the distance, you know you've made it. So lighthouses still, for the mariner, they still have a reassuring sense that, yes, there's actually land out there at the end of this water.
One ship that was notorious for not reaching the land at the end of the water was the Edmund Fitzgerald. When the Fitzgerald was christened in 1958, she was considered the queen of the Great Lakes. At 730 feet, she was the biggest and the fastest ship in the fleet. Like the Titanic, she was believed to be unsinkable. November 9th, 1975. The Edmund Fitzgerald left Duluth, Minnesota, loaded with iron ore. The trip began under fair skies. The forecast indicated that a winter storm was fast approaching. The captain of the Fitzgerald, Ernest McSorley, was well seasoned, and foul weather would not keep the Fitzgerald at port. With the wind and seas building, McSorley chose a course along the north shore of Lake Superior. He evidently hoped that the land would offer protection from the increasing wind and waves.
According to what I've read, they had anywhere from 30 to 35 foot seas running. So they had quite a large sea. Wind knots were 70, 80 knots. If this was down in the tropics, it would be considered a hurricane type force of the storm. But up here, we don't get hurricanes, we just get nasty storms.
The Fitzgerald continued on. What happened next remains a mystery. It's widely believed that wind and waves alone did not sink the great ship.
The vessel should not have sunk. The bottom line is that vessel should have been able to handle that storm and should not have sunk. So I think he touched bottom, pulled his tank, and it was a slow process of slowly loading the vessel down with more water. And I think what happened is he got one large sea rolling up the deck and he just submarined. I'm sure they were standing in the pilot house waiting for her to come back from that last wave that went by, and she didn't. She didn't.
Sometime during the night of November 10th, 1975, the Edmund Fitzgerald and her entire crew were lost. The wreck of the Fitzgerald lies just offshore from the light station at Whitefish Point and the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum. The ship's bell, recovered from the wreck of the Fitzgerald, is the centerpiece of the museum. Museum director Tom Farnquist was instrumental in the recovery of the bell.
Family members who lost loved ones aboard the Edmund Fitzgerald asked if we wouldn't return to the vessel to bring up an object that would really represent what the Fitzgerald was about, and there was only one object I could think of. That was the bell that had the name engraved on it. We established this museum with the intent to share with those that can't dive to shipwrecks the excitement, the adventure of diving, and also to remember the sailors that were lost. It's the perfect spot for a shipwreck museum because the fact that we're located on site of some of the worst tragedies on Great Lakes along the shipwreck coast. The first lighthouse was built here in 1849. It was built of stone and concrete, and it was replaced in 1861 with the present structure. It's an 80-foot tall iron skeletal tower. This tower surprises a lot of people. They'll take a look at it and they'll see this metal structure that's fairly well engineered. It went together like an erector set, but it was designed back in the 1860s and was completed in 1861. We found that Whitefish was probably the most historically significant light station on Lake Superior, being the first one established way back in 1849. Through time, I think we've put together what we consider a world-class interpretive center here at Whitefish.
The old world charm of Mackinac Island in western Lake Huron has drawn tourists to its shores for over a century. Little has changed here over the years. A ban on cars adds to the amiable pace of the island and keeps visitors returning. Historian Phil Porter.
Mackinac Island has been a tourist destination for well over a century. And it began after the Civil War as people began to come here as a result of a desire to escape. People across the country looked for summer places, and Mackinac was a natural because it has natural beauty, historic charm, and a very healthy environment, which is one of the things people were looking for in their summer places after the Civil War.
From the sweeping porch of the Grand Hotel, the view of Round Island Lighthouse offers another reminder of the past. Round Island Lighthouse was built in 1896 to mark the channel for commercial ships passing through the Straits of Mackinac. It also guided private yachts into Mackinac Island. Once home to 3 full-time keepers, the light at Round Island was decommissioned by the Coast Guard in 1947. Years of neglect took their toll. The foundation washed away, and the Round Island light was in danger of crumbling into the lake. Through community effort, the structure was saved. Restoration of the lighthouse is an ongoing project. Dick Mole is the president of the Great Lakes Lightkeepers Association. He's a driving force in the movement to save Great Lakes lighthouses. Today, he's coordinating a party of willing workers from Boy Scout Troop 323 in Freeland, Michigan. This is the Scout Troop's 3rd season of work on Round Island.
Today, we've got a small amount of cleanup work to do. We've got to pour some cement pads underneath the privy and put a jack in place. Okay?
1, 2, 3. I think we're supposed to lift up, guys. Okay, who's got the crowbar?
The ongoing work at Round Island is truly a labor of love. Each job completed is its own reward. Dick Mole has saved several lighthouses. His example has inspired others to work for lighthouse preservation.
One of the things that overwhelms people, you look at the whole thing and you say it can't be done. But as soon as you say, let's do 1 room at a time or 1 inch at a time, then all of a sudden it becomes manageable and you have your head screwed on right and you can really accomplish it that way. And the thing that's really sort of exciting about it is that working with young people or working with people in a project is sort of like a Huck Finn experience. We all have fun doing it.
1, 2, 3,
Well, it's a lot of pride
going into this. A lot of work, a lot of manpower. You should have seen it before upstairs. Looks like somebody broke in and had a 6-week party. A lot of trash.
The privy was laying down also, and that's standing up now.
One day we probably hauled each 2,000 pounds of stones.
Dale Gensman's father helped build the Round Island Lighthouse in 1895. For Dale, the restoration honors his father's craftsmanship.
This is a sunburst on a knoll pole. The sunburst was a manufactured part of the carpenter's life. He left a little bit of something in everything that he did. If people are going to come over here and visit, they're entitled to see how it originally looked. It's going to look like the day that it was first put in here. It's all oak. It should finish up very nicely.
The preservation of the Round Island Lighthouse is really an excellent example of different partnerships working together to achieve a worthwhile goal. It's really the volunteer spirit and seeing everybody work together and rowing the boat, so to speak, really works.
Do they do the candle in there?
You mean, do we still light the lighthouse? Yeah. It was shut down about 28 years ago, so it's not used as a working lighthouse anymore, but we do every once in a while, like about once every 2 weeks or so, we light the light just to show folks what it used to look like when it was still working. Sure.
The lighthouse, perched high on the cliff, has drawn visitors to Split Rock in Minnesota since the 1920s. And they're still coming. Today, visitors can learn the history of Split Rock Lighthouse from the ground up. The greatest challenge to the builders of the lighthouse at Split Rock was getting men and materials to the site.
To bring a ship in here, actually a 35-foot boat that would bring in the supplies from Duluth, they had to make sure the weather was going to be calm enough to unload, first of all, and they had to make sure that they were going to be able to make it back to Duluth, a 45, 50-mile round trip to get another load of supplies.
The supply boat was stationed at the base of the cliff. A derrick lifted the materials for 10 buildings up to the construction site. Lee Radzik manages the site today.
It's amazing the construction quality and the workmanship that did go into these buildings, considering the tough and rugged conditions they had to build under. It's not like running back to the hardware store if you need another piece of equipment.
A parade of carpenters, bricklayers, and steel workers who earned an average of 35 cents an hour worked through November. They returned the following spring to finish the job. The cost for the entire 10-building light station was $72,000. The Fresnel lens, imported from France, was the crowning jewel of the light station at Split Rock.
This is considered a third-order bivalve lens or clamshell lens, which is different than the beehive or circular type lenses. There's 252 different lens panels in it, counting both sides of it. The whole revolving apparatus is 4.5 tons. It's massive.
The clockwork mechanism that rotates the lens is one of only a handful that still work.
Well, it's basically like a grandfather's clock or cuckoo clock, where a series of weights, in this case 250 pounds of weights, that are attached to a cable, unwind down a column that runs all the way down the center of the lighthouse. And as those weights drop, in this case 40 feet, it'll revolve the lens. And that's one reason why keepers had to be on duty all the time, was to make sure that the light was running on time, that the clockwork was running on time, that the weights were wound up and hadn't dropped to the bottom. I've heard stories of keepers sleeping underneath the bottom of the weights so that if the weights came down and touched them, they'd realize it and wake up and wind the weights again. Part of their job was to use the crank, and every 2 hours put about 150 cranks onto the clockwork and bring those weights back up. Wind that cable up on the spool and keep the gears running and the lens turning and that light shining on a constant rotation out on the lake.
The Grand Traverse Lighthouse enjoys a second life under the care of a special keeper. David McCormick grew up here and has come back to reopen the lighthouse.
Yeah, I grew up here. I came here when I was 9 years old, 1922. This was no electricity, all kerosene.
What's the history of this?
Well, this building was built in 1858. It was a one-man station then they made a two-man station when they put the fog signal in. And originally the front door was over on the west side of the building. I want to show you here's the bathtub here.
Once again, Dave's home, the Grand Traverse Light is open to visitors. The house is filled with family treasures. Dave's stories bring the rooms to life.
And then we had two pair of underwear, long johns. One was in the wash and you had one on. But you changed them every Saturday.
Whether you needed to or not.
You're right. Yeah, that's right. This organ has quite a history. My mother got that in 1899 at the turn of the century, when my father gave it to her as a wedding present. And we had a regular sing-along here, a couple times a week. When she'd play the organ with the concertina, my father played a zither, or that square thing. I played a harmonica, and I had a brother played the guitar. Had three sisters that were really good singers. That's my father there. Yeah. My father used to sit over there and play cribbage, solitary cribbage. And we had an old 1924 Atwater Kent radio that's out in the back room with 3 dials on it. That's where I first learned about the Green Bay Packers.
Did you have this Victrola back in the days when you were here, or is that newer vintage than that?
Oh, that's what we had. I'll tell you a story about that. If the spring broke, we'd come up here and we'd turn it with our finger. It's trouble finding needles for them.
Not exactly high fidelity, but
cool.
But it worked.
It was a happy time, a family time.
Once a crucial part of lake navigation, the lighthouses have outlived their original intent. The lighthouses of the Great Lakes have had many caretakers. First, the original lighthouse service, then the Coast Guard, and now the parks, historical societies, and private owners. Once a crucial part of lake navigation, the lighthouses have outlived their need, but most are heading into a happy retirement with a renewed purpose. The lighthouses of the inland sea are more than historic monuments. Perhaps we see a deeper value in what these buildings stood for, a light in the night, marking the way.